Hello and welcome back to the EXPOSOME Stories. I'm Dr. Renita Rajan, a dermatologist, and in this channel and series, I share my understanding of the exposome, mainly in relation to dermatology. The exposome is simply the sum total of all the external factors that have an impact on the human organism, and I believe that acquiring and practicing good lifestyle habits are very important in keeping the skin young, healthy, and radiant, and that's precisely what I wish to educate about in this series. When we say exposome, our mind usually thinks of a mental image as one of factors around us. But today, we'd like to discuss something that's kind of like within us, but actually a health exposure. Let me start by asking you a question. How many days do you think you have to have a messed up sleep cycle for it to cause negative effects on your skin? As in, how many days that you don't have a good sleep cycle for the body to feel the heat literally? 1 month, 2 months, 1 year? According to this Korean study done late last year in June, sometime 2021, all it takes is just 1 week of a messed up sleep cycle, one single week, for the skin to show changes like increased flaking, decreased skin glow, skin less glossier skin, decreased skin elasticity. Just about a week of not having good sleep. And any ideas on how long it takes to get back to normal? For 1 week of no sleep, it needs a minimum 4 weeks. Based on the normal skin cycle, it needs a minimum 4 weeks for the skin to reset itself. So you go one step in the wrong direction and you need 4 steps in the right direction to offset the damage. Sleep cycle impacting the skin and the hair has recently been listed as one of the key exposome factors for skin aging, hair aging, because of the number of ways in which it can damage the skin and the hair. So the first thing that comes to our minds when we think about sleep disruption is the appearance of dark circles. Though the actual contribution of sleep to dark circles, say compared to an allergic tendency, is much less. In fact, people who are sleep deprived tended to perceive their dark circles as more problematic than those who were well rested, even though both had the same level of pigmentation on objective testing. In other words, it's not that we look dull when we haven't slept well, it's just that our brain makes us perceive that we look more dull and more unattractive when we haven't slept well. It's already known that the brain autocorrects. It adds or takes away points we give to our own appearance. But how big is that size of the autocorrect? How much? Remember your weakest subject in school where you would go after your teacher beseeching for grace marks to get a pass? Imagine you went to get some grace marks and instead your teacher gave you a full 10 marks. Let's say there was a wrong question in your question paper and teacher says, take these 10 marks. That's what the brain is capable of doing. That's the size of the autocorrect. We always thought that the brain gives grace marks to the appearance through chemical and hormonal channels to modulate how we look to ourselves. But a well-rested brain can give you a 10 marker. So even though we thought it's like half a point here, half a point there, but no, the well-rested brain adds a real factor of positivity to how we see ourselves, and that the rest comes from sleep. So all of this is not imagined. There are actual pathways and molecules and hormones that are secreted when you sleep well that cause this effect. What's more, the more sleep deprived you are, you feel proportionately bad about your skin's appearance, and that's the size of the brain's autocorrect. Exactly what does a lack of sleep do to the skin and the hair and the body as such? With the hair, in a 2020 study in over 1,800 women, inadequate and disturbed sleep was found to be associated with severe and premature hair loss, higher grades of female pattern hair loss compared to those who had enough and good quality sleep. An even larger study with almost a whopping 8,000 participants done just 6 months ago in China identified night shift work as a risk factor for a skin condition called chronic spontaneous urticaria. Urticaria is basically a common dermatological condition that's associated with skin swelling. You see areas of swelling on the skin, hives. It's an allergic response. We call it commonly called as hives. We see intensely itchy patches of skin that stay with that way for hours and then it disappears with or without anti-itch medications depending on the severity. Some people may also have some more dramatic swelling of the lips around the eyes depending on the severity. So this large study found an actual increase in risk for this condition in people who worked night shifts and especially for longer hours. So we know that there's some level of sensitivity, immune triggers that happen associated with sleep, and this effect also translates when we think about skin aging. But specifically looking at skin aging, there's this experiment from the sleep lab in Sweden which compared the appearance of people after 8 hours of good sleep and after 31 hours of sleep deprivation. The result was that sleep deprived people were simply rated as less healthy, less beautiful, and less attractive compared to when they themselves were better rested and had slept well. Let's discuss a few points around sleep that make a difference to the skin. First, do the hours of sleep matter or does the bedtime matter? Well, answer is both matter, But the best case scenario is when you get to go to bed on time, get a good quality of sleep without any tossing and turning for an adequate number of hours. The next best is that you go to bed at a time that you're able to and have a good quality sleep for an adequate number of hours. A not so great but still not terrible option would be to go to bed late, have good quality sleep but less than the optimal hours. And anything less than this, like going to bed late, not having quality sleep at all for any amount of time, that's something that can really accelerate skin aging. But in terms of absolute hours, how many hours are we talking about? A study compared women who were regarded to be poor sleepers with an absolute sleep duration of 5 hours or less to women who slept around 7 to 9 hours per day. The poor sleeper group had a higher skin aging score with poorer skin barrier function, less resistance to UV induced damage compared to those who had slept well. In fact, those who had slept well were also more aware that they looked good, in keeping with what we just discussed, compared to those who slept less. And we all know that most of us are hypercritical to ourselves about the way we look. Our constant inner chatter says that we don't look good at all. But if a good night's sleep can make us appreciate ourselves better, why not give ourselves a beauty boost with some good beauty sleep? As regards the best time to go to bed, the best way to look at this is to understand the role of the repair hormone of the night, melatonin. The father of fairy tales, Hans Christian Andersen, tells a fairy tale about a magical person called Old Lokoi. Old Lokoi was said to be an amazing storyteller whose stories left his audience spellbound. But he didn't come in at all times, but only in the night. When night fell, magical Old Lokoi entered people's homes. But you couldn't see him because he was invisible, and you couldn't hear him because he didn't wear shoes but only socks. As soon as he came in, he would sprinkle sweet milk in children's eyes, which would make them softly fall asleep. He carried two umbrellas with him. One was a brightly colored one with many pictures and lots of rainbows in it, and the other one was dull and drab. If the child had been good all day, he would open the brightly colored umbrella over them, and the child would then enjoy the most beautiful dreams and have the most rested sleep. But were the child to be naughty, old Lukoi would open a drab black umbrella over his head, and the child would have a very restless sleep with a lot of nightmares. And because you could only dream if you were asleep, and because you only could sleep if you were in bed, children had to be in bed already if they wanted old Lukoi to visit them, so that when he put the magic dust into their eyes, they could drift off softly into sleep and have a good restful sleep and have a beautiful sleep experience with happy dreams. Even though the story was told as early as 1824, in nothing less than a high profile Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, I see this as a huge shout out to melatonin, the repair hormone of the night. You had to be in bed at the correct time to have the optimal melatonin secretion, and this would take care of the sleep initiation, sustained sleep, and overall rested state. Like old Lokoi, melatonin secretion also kicks in to get us started to sleep, but sometimes we resist it to stay awake with necessity, sometimes when we are working, or much more often without a real necessity, given that 82 to 84% of us have our work or study activities mostly in the day, and then we end up sleep disturbances, sleep difficulties, disturbed sleep, and so on. So, what is this melatonin and how is it so important? Melatonin is a very, very important reset hormone secreted by a gland in the brain, which kind of acts like a timekeeper of the body and drives the day and night cycles of the various body functions. We call this a circadian rhythm. It's a pretty important hormone, as a messed up circadian rhythm can cause big problems like, say, depression, irritability, mood swings, but also even bigger issues like increased cardiovascular risk, and has most recently been linked to cancer, particularly breast cancer. But especially for aging, sleep deprivation and disturbed melatonin secretion are associated with decreased attractiveness, increased sagging of the skin, impaired skin barrier function with more dryness, skin redness, sensitivity, probably related to the underlying stress of inadequate sleep. In fact, the role of melatonin in maintaining the overall health, not just of the skin alone and youth, is so versatile that this hormone is called the Swiss Army knife of anti-aging. So, for being able to regulate so many antioxidant activities which reset aging and restore balance to the body. Moving on, what are the lesser important factors around your beauty sleep but make a difference? First up is the temperature. Extremes of temperature causes the skin to be damaged. So if you're sleeping in near polar temperatures, like you said, 16 and 18 degrees on your aircon, expect your skin to be dehydrated, dull and flaky. If not outright flaky, at least dehydrated and dull, because you can also expect your dandruff to act up at these temperatures, because that's not the temperature that's conducive for skin health. Next, Continuous exposure to high speed air from your fans can also cause the skin to dry up easily. So make sure to check that your head end is not at the rightly, it's not receiving the fans through directly. Then comes the sleep position. If you are able to, sleeping with the face straight up looking at the ceiling has been studied to be less likely to cause facial wrinkles than if you sleep on the side or if you sleep face down. The operative word is that if you are able to. I, for one, can never sleep on anything but the right. So I have more prominent nasolabial lines on one side than the other, and probably wake up with more puffiness on the right eye compared to the left. Going on, there are some R&D level studies that talk about reduction of facial wrinkles when you sleep on pillows whose fibers have been infused with the mineral copper. But since we don't have much data on this, we don't see this as a recommendation for now, but can be something interesting if you want to try it. Especially if more research comes in, this will be an interesting way to look at. You can anti-age overnight by sleeping on a copper infused pillow. We do not know. But here's the take-home tip from me to you for this episode. I'm going to use the data from the Swedish study for this one. So if you have an interview, a date, an event, or your wedding, or an important business meeting when you need to look bright, beautiful, attractive, healthy, and powerful and energized, aim for a good 8 hours of sleep on time. But the problem is that sleep is a habit. You won't just get into it without putting in the effort, especially when your emotions and thoughts are all over the place, especially for big moments like an interview or a wedding or whatever. And so that's why you need to develop a healthy sleep hygiene as a matter of habit, just like a good sunscreen habit or trying to get six packs, exercise, eating habits, all of which work on the principle of compound interest. Sleep also makes a difference when you do it over and over correctly. But yes, put in those 8 hours of sleep and seize your big day, and I'll see you soon. Take care.